anything wrong with putting it on your resume?
I have not been streaming this thing. Yeah. No, I don't think so either. Yeah, go ahead. We forgot to start the live stream, so I hope it's fine. I don't know how many people even watch this, right?
Jesus.
I'm playing. Lots of people do. It's just that, you know, the in-person experience is so much better.
Okay, if you want to live stream it, if you're or not here.
If you want to live stream. Hold on, wait, no, they can't hear that. What does that mean? How are they supposed to know? Post it, hey, Murphy, can you post it on the Facebook, please?
If you have any friends that want to see this, it's shoutkey.com/apricot. Apricot. Sorry.
Here. All right. It's the first week. It gets better after this. It has to, right?
I promise.
Any other questions before we continue? Yes.
Should you put your interests on your resume, and so should you put both your professional and casual?
Professional interests, if they are relevant to the job you're applying for, I would say it goes best on like a cover letter. But if it's something like particularly unique, then definitely, I mean, I would say it's fair game to put on your resume as long as it doesn't get in the way with like some of the more, pieces that may hold a little more weight, if that makes sense. Personal interests, again, if it's like, if you have like significant accomplishments you'd like to mention about, you know, some personal interest or hobby that you have, it's worth considering putting on there on like case-by-case basis. You know, like I wouldn't say definitely do it or definitely don't do it. But once again, I would say highly specialized or like, you know, something that the average person wouldn't see every day. Then there may be room to put it on the resume. For sure. Okay, let's continue. Man, that slide felt like an eternity. Okay. So, and there's 6 more to go. All right, okay. Recruiter phone call. Yeah, so let's say you get past, so you've applied with your resume and everything's cool and you get an email back from the recruiter and it's like, good, you haven't been rejected. So, great news. So what may happen next is going to be a recruiter phone call. And that's why this asterisk is right there next to it, because it doesn't happen with every company. Some, especially for like internships, not every company will go through with having a recruiter specifically call you over the phone. They may go straight into like the more technical side of things. But if you do have a recruiter phone call, then it will likely be fairly short. You could probably expect it to be about maybe like 20 minutes, discussing a little bit about your background that you had put on your resume. Definitely brush up on your classic behavioral questions, because if they're going to ask anything, it will probably be something about that. Like talk about an interesting challenge that you've recently faced, or a time that you had difficulties with the team. And essentially, this is also an opportunity for you to once again talk about how excited you are about the prospect of working for this company. Very rarely will they give you any technical questions at this stage, and if they do, it will probably be relatively simple trivia questions. They're not going to ask you to write code at all during this phone screen. And if they do, then that would be a very, very interesting choice, because the recruiter is typically not the person who evaluates the technical ability of a candidate. So after the recruiter phone call, we will move on to the initial screen. And what the initial screen is it can be one of two things. The first thing that it could be is a homework assignment. And what exactly does this homework assignment entail? Well, that in itself can also generally be like one of two things. So the first thing it could be is a coding challenge off of something like HackerRank. Now, what HackerRank is if for those of you who are not familiar with it, HackerRank is an online platform where essentially it provides like a bank of questions or puzzles, you can think of them. And in order to solve them, you have to write code that will calculate the appropriate responses or answers or solutions. And I mean, you guys can go on there right now to check it out on your laptops if you have your browsers open. It's just hackerrank.com. But what it is basically you're given a text editor where you can write code. You're given a problem statement along with some test cases. And we will go over these once again in more depth and detail in the next week when we thoroughly cover technical interviews. But yeah, you will be asked to solve 1 to 3 problems inside this text editor. And your solutions are expected to pass as many test cases as possible, generally all of them if you want to move on to the next step for sure. And you want their solutions to be efficient as well. And this process, this homework assignment typically takes around 1 to 2 hours. I've personally had some that goes like up to 3, and it can definitely build up, but I mean, that's just the reality of things these days. And if it's not a hacker rank coding challenge, then what it could be is a more traditional take-home assignment where they give you longer than 1 to 2 hours to do something, but it could be like over a week, and they ask you to implement some sort of simple system or class. I think, gosh, I'm trying to remember an example of something that I was given. I don't know. I'm not entirely sure if you guys have.
So usually smaller startups are the companies that will give these long-term take-home challenges because they're the people who probably have more time to review it. For example, I have been asked to design a website that makes a few API calls and like lists some data. If you're applying for like a front-end specific job, they'll probably ask you to do something more along front-end. But I've been asked to like design a mobile app, but something that's like super simple. It's usually never like a full out like side project level kind of thing. It's just they want to see that you know how to do like what they're going to need you to do on the job.
Thank you for the clarification. Does anybody have any questions about any of that? I know like we may have thrown in some technical terms there that you may not be familiar with, but so, I mean, yeah, if you want to ask, now's the time for sure. Any questions? Okay, well, if there are no questions, then right, the initial screen will either be some sort of homework assignment like this, or it will be a phone interview, which is coincidentally also probably part of the future rounds as well. So like you may have around 2 phone interviews for internships. Full-time, you may have 1 or 2, and then they'll take you on site. But that's in the next step. So the phone Skype interview, we'll cover that right now. Typically, it is 45 minutes to 1 hour. You are speaking with a full-time software engineer at this company. And the first 5 minutes is typically very short introductions about yourself, about themselves. And they may ask like 1 or 2 behavioral questions. Here are some examples. Tell me about yourself. Tell me about a project you worked on. Things of that sort. And then at the very end, they will leave time for you to ask questions. And you should have questions. Do not ever come into a phone interview or any other interview without any questions to ask about the company. Just don't do it, because you need to show during the entire time that you have a genuine interest in learning more about this business. Now, the bulk of this interview will be for technical questions. You may receive 1 to 2, probably, if you're, depending on the company, these technical questions will, obviously range in difficulty, and every now and again, the software engineer will add, various extensions or other requirements to this question as you complete them. You will most likely be told to work inside a live text editor, like on the computer while you're talking with them on the phone. So you're expected to tell about your thought process while you're going through this, and write a code that properly, calculates the solution, of course. And you also be expected to analyze the complexity of your solutions. So for any of y'all that have taken EECS 214, 212, or 336, then the runtime complexities of your data structures and of the algorithms that you write. You should be very familiar with big O notation, things of that sort. Once again, we will cover that next week. But yeah, so does anybody, okay, right. I don't know if I was clear enough on this part. This part, generally, you are like on the computer, on the phone, and it's like a Google Doc type system where you're like you and the phone interviewer are looking at the same text editor, and the interviewer is asking you questions and you're, telling them your solution while you code, and they can see what you're doing the whole time and everything. That's essentially what most phone interviews are. There are some phone interviews that don't do the coding. I've had some that are mainly like just like a more of a technical discussion, and then they ask you about like certain related concepts that are relevant to the job description. But for the most part, when we say phone interviews or technical phone interviews, you should expect to be writing some code. Any questions about this? Sweet. Okay, so we're almost at the finish line. So the on-site interview is once again optional for internships, very likely for full-time interviews or for full-time positions. And if you do go on site, what's going to happen is the company will pay for your flight and hotel for you to go to wherever their office is located, and you will have basically like an entire half day of interviews and of the same vein as like, what you might expect from a phone interview, except this time it's all going to be in person, and you are going to be expressing your solution most likely on a whiteboard with a dry erase marker. And it's not the most fun situation, but it's definitely a crucial part of the on-site process. You will probably also have like some behavioral interviews to go along with that. I would expect 3 to 5 interviews is typically the norm, each of them 45 minutes long on site. And then you will probably also be able to have like a more casual lunch in between with some of the interviewers, so that you could get a better idea of the types of people that you're going to be working with. Because as it turns out, you may not notice this, but you're also kind of interviewing the company too, right? To see if you could see yourself working there. So if you do get to make it on site, definitely keep track of the culture fit and see if you could imagine, actually being here and writing code with them. So after you get past that point, it's over. Then within 1 to 2 weeks, you should receive some sort of notice from the recruiter that you've been working with this whole time, and they will tell you about your final decision, whether or not you were extended the job offer or whether they have declined. Whatever the case, at that point, if you were accepted or if they did offer you a job, then you could probably, for full-time, that's probably when negotiations begin. For interns, you have significantly less room to do that. So, and I don't know if I need to say anything else about the final decision. I guess not. I mean, at that point, congratulations, hopefully. Okay, so where exactly do you apply now that you know all this stuff? Well, for us Northwestern students, you have CareerCat. For the freshmen who don't know, search it up on Google. It's I don't think you need to take any classes to activate that. But for those of you in McCormick, you will probably want to take CRDV 301. That is a course that essentially covers a lot of what we've said here, but in like a more general terms for like engineering jobs in general. And they'll also go over like the co-op program that Northwestern has here, among other things. And you will have access to McCormick Connect, which will give you the opportunity to interview with more engineering-specific employers. Career fairs, we have the biggest one for software engineering internships, I would say, is the SWE Industry Day that happens later on during this quarter. SWE does not stand for software engineering. It is Society of Women Engineers, but everyone is invited as far as I know. And we also have the Tech Expo in winter, which is a larger general career fair for all engineering majors or like people in the sciences. You also have company websites. That was the first item that I said way back when you could apply online. You can go to company websites like dropbox.com/jobs or something. I don't know. Like you could probably go apply there. If they have new grad or intern positions open, you will see them there. Piazza has jobs. Okay, Piazza, Glassdoor, also possibly have job listings. AngelList is a good place to look if you would like to work for a startup. And intern.supply is like definitely one of my favorite personal websites. I don't know who made this, but it's like really brilliant. It's a person that like basically compiled a list of popular internship positions that are currently open in like California, New York, Boston, wherever. And I think it should still be up to date at this moment. So for any of you all looking for internships, that is a wonderful resource. I can't recommend that enough. Certainly take a look at it. And if there is no formal application, then another thing you can do, I haven't really done this. Maybe Brandon or Lily can attest to it. Okay.
I cold email recruiters all the time. And like maybe, depending on your resume, maybe 25% or 10% of the time they'll respond. And 1 out of 10 is actually really good. Like you're pretty much putting in almost no effort. You can copy paste the same email if you really want to everybody, or you can target it towards the company if it's something you really care about. But either finding a recruiter on LinkedIn, like sometimes you can just Google, like for example, Airbnb technical recruiter LinkedIn, and you'll find people. You can just message them on LinkedIn, or some recruiters in their LinkedIn bios will have their emails, and that usually means they're more receptive to cold emails, so definitely go for those. If you have friends who have interned at companies, you can ask them for their recruiters' emails, and that also works. Yeah, and then there was a question. How common is it for companies to do technical interviews before a personality interview with a recruiter? Do you? Yeah.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's like unheard of, but it's usually the other way around. All right?
No. Personality interviews almost never happen until on-site. Like if you have a recruiter phone call, it's not really personality, it's kind of like fit in terms of your experience and your interests, and sometimes the recruiter will like match you to a team that they think you'd be interested after the recruiter phone call. But the only time there's really a culture fit interview is maybe if at a small startup you go and interview, you do a technical interview on site, and they'll probably also want to see if you're a culture fit because obviously they're small, they want people who they can work with. Or at a larger company, I know companies like Airbnb, for example, their on-site is 5 interviews, 3 of them are technical and 2 of them are cultural. So in that case, they're really looking for somebody who will fit, but at companies like Amazon definitely doesn't do cultural interviews. And like, it really depends on the company culture and what they're looking for. But personality interviews will almost never happen before a technical interview. Yeah.
Sounds good. Fair enough.
Yeah.
For technical interviews, like, can you give me some examples of like what questions they would ask?
Yeah, so next week we're gonna do like hard, like not hard, I didn't mean that. But we're gonna actually practice problems and show you guys like how a whiteboarding session might look like or something like that. But like a quick example might be like validate a binary search tree. Again, it depends on the company you're applying to. Like, for example, a company like Uber, they asked to build a rate limiter, which is basically checking to make sure like people aren't like sending a bunch of promo codes at once. So they'll ask you to like make something that will limit the amount of promo codes each user can do. But usually, to be honest, they have nothing to do with what you'd actually do on the job. So like studying for a technical interview is like a whole nother thing compared to like classes or side projects.
So let's say you have multiple on-site interviews, like from different companies. Does it ever help to like say, like tell other companies that I'm interviewing other companies as well?
Yeah.
And then like let's say you do get offers from one company that has like the offer's gonna expire, but you have other interviews as well. Do you ever like let them know? Like is that
Yeah.
the state or?
For the most part, recruiters will always ask you, or they should ask you, even when they're setting up the first recruiter phone screen, they'll ask if you have offers and if you have deadlines. Some companies will ask if you're interviewing with other companies, but it's always not a bad idea to tell them that you have an offer deadline. Most companies will just expedite the process for you and make sure they get back to you sooner. And then if you have multiple offers, you can go into like salary negotiations and stuff for sure. Good job if you're in that spot.
Any other questions about anything that we had said today? Yeah.
For a technical interview, we kind of know, because Lily
Yeah, I think because usually you'll have like an email discussion like prior to the interview, so I'm sure um, your interviewer will actually give some context to it. Whether it will be like more of like a practical interview in which you actually like build something that you'll probably be doing day to day on the job, or if it's something like the more traditional algorithmic interview. If not, I think it's okay to ask. Like, is it not?
To ask if there will be like ask what to expect.
Recruiters want you to succeed, so you can ask them any question you want, and they'll answer or not, but they're not gonna like take points off of your application, for example, if you ask a question that they can't answer. For the most part, interviewers will like be as helpful as they can, and they want you to ask questions.
Like for PM interviews, like obviously like a lot of things are different, but like in terms of like the timeline and process.
PM interviews. I don't know.
So I can't say I have experience, but I have looked into the process because I was at one point interested in PMing. A lot of PM interviews are much less technical, but they do have technical aspects. For example, my manager at Amazon told me a question he always asks is, how would you design the elevator in this building? So they want to see that you can think technically, but you might not have to have the technical skills. But I would also say that being a PM at every company is completely different. So if at all possible, I would try talking to PMs at the company that you're applying to. Yeah, PM is like a whole nother world, sorry.
Yes.
On your resume, not really. Usually your graduation date is a good indicator of what you're looking for. But when you're talking to a recruiter, either they should be the ones who are clarifying or you should clarify with them. Especially at career fairs, one of the first things I say is like, I'm looking for a full-time position rather than an internship. Questions to ask the company? A lot of times I'll ask, like, what's a typical day for you? Because some companies have a lot of meetings, some companies like a lot more heads down coding, and I want to know like how much time I'm going to spend coding. Yeah.
Well, I'm going to jump in here too. I think taking or asking questions is a really good opportunity to show the company who you are and what you care about and like add a little bit of like personality to the interview. So I would suggest like trying to ask questions that you're genuinely curious about at the company, like maybe something along like their values, or like their workflows or things like that. So like something that I always ask is like, how do you guys promote diversity? How do you make it a good space for women? Things like that. That shows the company like who you are and what you care about.
Yep.
Anything? Oh, you mean like the recruiting timeline?
Yeah, the recruiting timeline for software engineering is pretty whack. Like, it's already started. It depends on what kind of companies you're looking at. Bigger companies started like over the summer in June and July. Pretty much I'd say almost any company you've ever heard of is probably recruiting right now. Smaller startups usually recruit in the spring. So actually Northwestern has a startup career fair that's super cool. It's where I got my internship 2 summers ago. And you just resume drop a bunch, and because they don't really know what positions they'll need in a year, so they recruit a little bit later. But now is a great time to start recruiting. Okay, if there are no more questions, these slides I've already posted on GitHub. I will put a link in the Facebook event. And if you have your resume and you want it to be looked over, just come up to the front and we have a few people who will be able to look over the resume and give some feedback. Question?
So for like freshmen who probably aren't exactly there yet for internships and kind of stuff like that, but still want to be involved in like documenting whether they're there
Actually, a lot of big companies have specific programs for undergrads, like Microsoft, Facebook, Google. Everyone has like undergraduate, like freshman and sophomore programs. So those are actually a really good opportunity for you. You can still go to the career fair and also get contact info. Even if you get an email now, you can email them in 2 years as long as they still work there. And even if they don't remember you, you have a recruiter's email that you can like get your way in there. Also, generally, startups are a really good way to like get some kind of experience on your resume before going for a bigger company, depending on what your interests are and where your skill levels are. Okay, yeah, so next week we're going to be doing technical interviews if you want more hands-on prep. Also, throughout the quarter, if this has been your first hack night, we have these every Wednesday at 7 p.m. in the same place, almost every Wednesday. There will always be a Facebook event. There will always be food as long as you guys keep signing in. And right now, we know that like recruitment might not help freshmen as much, or even sophomores, but later on in the quarter, we wanted to get this down since recruitment has already started. Later on in the quarter, we'll have tutorials for things that you can learn, even if you have no experience. Yeah? Yeah, it's bit.ly/hacknightsignin. Yeah, okay, so resume reviews up here. Thanks, everyone. What?
That was good.
Okay. Hi. Yeah. Yeah, really quick. Let me